Energy Vehicle Summit 2025 gathered leaders from government, industry, and academia, united by a single mission to accelerate South Africa's transition to sustainable mobility. Hosted at the Gallagher Convention Center, the summit explored how innovation, policy, and investment can shape a cleaner, more competitive automotive future. Delivering the keynote, Gauteng MEC for Finance and Economic Development, Lebogang Maile, highlighted the economic and environmental benefits of new energy vehicles. He noted that the automotive industry contributes over 4% to national GDP and 12.5% to exports, making the NEV transition essential to safeguard global competitiveness, especially as the EU moves to phase out internal combustion engines by the year 2035.
It is an honor to stand before you this afternoon on this occasion of the New Energy Vehicle Summit. This summit takes place during the Transport Month, which has defined as some of its key areas emphasis on the move towards safer, smarter, and more environmentally friendly transport solutions, as well as connecting the role of transport in growing the economy, creating jobs, and providing access to work, education, and entertainment. The discussion on the importance of new energy vehicles is taking place at a critical time in South Africa, where the future of the automotive industry is at the center of national discourse. The South African automotive industry is facing a tough operating environment, heightened by the imposition of a unilateral 30% trade tariffs by the government of the United States, which has consistently been South Africa's second largest trading partner and key export destination for South African manufactured vehicles. On the manufacturing side, original equipment manufacturers also face mounting challenges. South Africa's automotive sector is particularly vulnerable to the 25% sectoral tariff imposed under the Section 232 of the United States Trade Expansion Act of 1962, which specifically targets automotive exports. The South African automotive industry is a cornerstone of the economy, and it contributes 22.6% to the total domestic manufacturing output. It also directly supports over 110,000 formal sector jobs, a significant number in an economy that is battling with the creation of sustainable employment. As was correctly asserted by the Automotive Business Council a few months ago, the tariffs and the broader uncertainty in our trade relations with the United States strikes at the heart of South Africa's industrialization agenda and threatens future investment in high-value manufacturing. Consider that Mercedes-Benz in East London exports at least 90% of its vehicles to the United States. The devastating consequences for the East London Special Economic Zone are thus evident. Tariffs have had a severe impact on South Africa's automotive industry, leading to a sharp drop in exports to the United States, job losses, company closures, and reduced GDP contribution of the automotive sector. As things stand, vehicle exports to the United States have fallen drastically, with one report noting an 82% drop in the first half of 2025 compared to the previous year. The industry has also experienced layoffs and job losses, with thousands of positions under threat to companies losing contracts and reducing production. At least 12 company closures have been linked to these pressures, impacting the component manufacturing sector and its over 80,000 employees. I thought Mr. Jim would have been here, and I'm sure he would have agreed when we said the threat to communities posed by these tariffs are huge. Communities like East London and the broader Eastern Cape province, which are heavily dependent on the automotive sector, are at risk of economic destabilization. Beyond job losses, NUMSA as a union has already highlighted the risk of short time that has been introduced at 26 companies in the Eastern Cape, many based in Gqeberha. Various economists have identified 3 structural challenges that are currently confronting the automotive industry, specifically navigating South Africa's exposure to tariff barriers in the United States as outlined, the dangers of dumping, and adapting to the global shifts towards energy vehicles. But while these are real challenges with far-reaching implications, critical interventions can transform them into opportunities, particularly in relation to new energy vehicles. Ladies and gentlemen, new energy vehicles are crucial for South Africa's future as they offer significant economic and environmental benefits, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions and lowering fuel costs, while supporting industrial growth and job creation through local manufacturing and infrastructure development. New energy vehicles produce significantly fewer greenhouse gases and pollutants compared to internal combustion engine vehicles, which can help in combating urban air pollution and climate change. Here in Johannesburg, air pollution has already proven to have catastrophic consequences. A report by the Clean Air Fund indicates that in 2019, around 5,300 premature deaths were attributed to air pollution in Johannesburg. At the national level, air pollution-related deaths stands at 29,830, exceeded premature deaths caused by tuberculosis, which stood at 19,784 in the same year. Air pollution produced by industrial and power plants, biomass fuels, and road transport, as well as seasonal smoke, could damage tourism and investment prospects as the city grows. The impact on public health is also significant, particularly as the public health system is confronted with structural challenges that includes a growing population in South Africa's wealthiest province. Thus, the Gauteng provincial government views new energy vehicles as having a direct link to the prospects of our broader provincial economy. The place of new energy vehicles is also clear when there are lower operating costs and potential for industrial growth is realized. Electricity is cheaper than petrol and diesel and energy vehicles, having fewer moving parts, reducing overall maintenance costs. Additionally, as South Africa's automotive industry contributes over 4% to the GDP and 12.5% to exports, transitioning to new energy vehicles can safeguard this sector's global competitiveness, especially with European Union bans on internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035. New engine vehicles are also key to a just energy transition, reducing reliance on fossil fuels, which can help reduce reliance on imported fossil fuels that are increasingly subject to price volatility. they could position South Africa to become a hub for regional battery production and new energy vehicle technology. Recognizing this potential, the national government has released green and white papers outlining plans for new energy vehicle production infrastructure and skills development. As a result of this intervention, a 150% tax rebate for new energy vehicle production starts in March 2026, with over 1 billion having recently been allocated to support local new energy vehicle and battery manufacturing. Such investments in local battery production address the salient challenges that new energy vehicles pose, mainly that they are significantly more expensive than internal combustion energy vehicles due to import duties and, more importantly, lack of local battery production. The national government is currently finalizing a strategy to secure supply chains for critical minerals like cobalt, lithium, and nickel, which are essential for battery production. This is part of larger plan to beneficiate this material locally instead of exporting raw forms. This is in alignment with the Gauteng Provincial Minerals Beneficiation Strategy that focuses on adding value to raw materials by transforming them into higher value products with a key role in refining precious and base metals. We are aiming to leverage the province's economic strength and infrastructure, including special economic zones, to support industries like diamond and gold processing, as well as the manufacturing of components for renewable energy technologies such as batteries and catalytic converters, contributing to the green energy transition.
Throughout the day, discussions focused on aligning policy, investment, and technology to grow South Africa's NEV ecosystem, with key themes of industrialization, skills development, market readiness, and infrastructure.
One of the things that we can pride ourselves as the AIDC is the incubation program that we are running with Ford, which has actually shown tremendous results of black industrialists participating in the main value chain of the supply of components to the Ford production line. With this change in technology that is coming, in fact it's not coming, it's here on our doorsteps. How can we, both AIDC, TASES and Ford, to ensure that we move the black industrialist to also participate in the component manufacturing of these products that distinguish between an NEV and an ICE vehicle in a similar format that we're currently having with the incubation hub that we've got at Ford. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Asanda. I think NEV is quite a huge topic right now, and it comes in at the right time when the world is transitioning into NEV, where it has become quite clear, not just to South Africa, but globally, as we see with the regulations that are being put in by the EU as well as the UK in terms of clean energy that is coming through. So this topic really becomes important. And what is key is how do we prepare the suppliers that we have or the incubatees that we currently have. Currently, we do run, within the incubation program, we run a 5-year program, as you rightfully know. The question that we most probably need to ask ourselves, is our timing in line with the transition that we are seeing now? Taking it back to the question that you posed directly to me, what is it that we are doing? We obviously have already started working, building PHEVs, which were launched early this year. The program is still very much in its infancy. In South Africa, we don't have all the necessary products that we need. As an OEM, I think my colleague will attest on my right-hand side to say that because we build cars from a global platform, we are required by globally to ensure that we build a car, which is the most, which is a commodity that requires safety. And we need to ensure that we are safe. So you'll find that we make use mostly of suppliers, tier 1 suppliers. What we are currently doing is we are encouraging our tier 1 suppliers to be piggybacking on tier 2 suppliers, which are the incubatees that we have now. We at Ford currently do have an assembly plant, and within that assembly plant, we're encouraging young suppliers to be coming on board. Again, we are quite at its infancy, to come on board and ensure that they get the training, sharing of skills, which we don't have in South Africa. I think my colleague that was on the stage earlier on spoke about skills. So skills do become really critical. How do we share those skills? What are the components that we are looking at as the OEMs that are in South Africa that we can share? But what is important, Asanda, I think what we should be looking at as an incubator, working with the AIDC, how do we leverage on the mineral beneficiation that we are seeing in front? How do we go down right up until tier N, ensure that we bring those suppliers on board so that they can be the people that form the value chain that we currently have. So that we don't continuously say in 5 and 10 years' time, we are still in an infancy program position, but that we have now moved and we can really truly start looking at localization and using the incubators that we have, as we had done with some of the successful incubators or suppliers that you know, like the likes of Bugs, that has become really successful and is one of the ones that stands out that we had worked with in the past. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Esther, for that. And I like the area that you have actually touched on, which is the mineral beneficiation. And it would have been very much nice if we had the mining industry joining us for them to give us more as to what are their plans with regards to the mineral beneficiation. The earlier speaker here did mention that most of these minerals are actually mined within the SADC region, but what are we doing to ensure that before they leave the shores of Africa, there is some work that has been done on too. But we'll have a discussion for another day. This calls for us to come back here again and talk about these issues. And coming to you, Neil, we know that there has been a serious impact that has been done by the introduction of the Chinese vehicles within the South African market, not only in South African market, but also globally, as our original OEMs are exporting, even in the countries that they export to. There is an impact that is being done by the introduction of these products. But mostly, they come as fully built up units. And by having them on our roads, it's not necessarily meaning they are adding jobs into the value chain, because they are built somewhere else and they are only maintained here. What are your plans for your institution, Cherry, that you are representing, in ensuring that there is localization that is taking place, and also in ensuring that these products do not only come as fully built up units, they come as complete knockdown units, and moving from there to part by part, whereby localization can come into play? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to break it down into a few components. Firstly, let's talk about Cherry's success, in inverted commas, in South Africa over the past 4 years. So if you all noticed that in the past we had Cherry QQ running around Tigo series about 8 years ago with a distributor. And we partnered with a local distributor, and it was a big failure. In the last 4 years, Cherry identified South Africa as the first right-hand drive market that we would reintroduce the Cherry product. This is a big honor that we have been picked as a South African community to bring this product into the fold. Chery is the biggest exporter of automobiles outside of China, passenger automobiles, for the last 22 years. So they trusted us to try to build the Chery brand into the export markets. So we went from 1,000 vehicles in our first year to, we were discussing it now, to a resounding success of almost 3,300 vehicles with 3 brands, so Chery, Omoda, and JQ. This is not me bragging about our brand. This is about me explaining a business case. That this business case needs to be justified across to our mother company, that South Africa can be the vessel for us to expand our business. So currently we have 145 dealers in a matter of 4 years. The leading Korean OEM has just under 180, and they've been here for about 30 years. So I think that's the first point of my answering the question. There has to be the right business case, there has to be the right growth for an importer to set the right conditions to become a manufacturer. Now there is a transition phase that comes through in terms of this manufacturing. So about a year ago, Chery undertook a feasibility study, or proposed a feasibility study with our headquarters to look at South Africa's potential options on local manufacturing. And we looked at joint ventures, we looked at full greenfields localization, and we also looked at contract manufacturing. So these were 3 areas that we had to bring into it. So now, because of my volume justification and my network development in South Africa, I was able to get the study off ground. And we started engaging with other OEMs to understand how this best practices done in South Africa, and the DTIC and other government entities. And we're at a point now, we're a year on, where we're very close on finishing up the localization or the feasibility study. The biggest challenge we have as Chery to attract business into the manufacturing business is our skills development. So a lot of the components, the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers are not at a level that we require in terms of our basic standards of operations in Chery. So let me put that in perspective. South Africa, Ford is the biggest manufacturing facility in South Africa at 200,000, potentially 200,000 units per year, and the most modern. Chery has 4 mega factories around our main base, Wuhu, doing 340,000 cars per year. We are at full capacity. We have 2,000 suppliers. One of our colleagues earlier presented that the German suppliers, the European suppliers are here in South Africa ready to partner up with us. We have these suppliers in Wuhu around our facility. This allows a lot of a high level of economies of scale and a high level of, so the cars landing here come in at a much more higher value proposition. So I would put more into the car. It makes more sense. Because China's motorization rate is quite more advanced, where we go into level 1 autonomy, higher safety requirements, connected vehicles. We building and designing cars for China, right, but also for export to meet European requirements. We are in Spain at the moment. We have a production facility with a local brand called Embro, and there is some joint venture manufacturing with this specific going into Europe. So with this expansion, comes to a point of an opportunity on business from my side to say, okay, fine, Neil, how are you going to bring the manufacturing, and what's our first target? So what we want to do, bring in not CKDs, a full complete knockdown units. We want to build vehicles in South Africa, and we want to focus not on exports, but on the South African market, which is roughly around about 500,000 cars per year for LCV and PC. We're taking the heavies. So we are focusing on trying to get the business case where we don't put ourselves at risk. I don't blame Ford or Mercedes-Benz or anybody else to be at the position they are with the tariffs from Trump. Just woke up one morning and said, okay, fine, let's make America great again. It affected the rest of us, right? We as Cherry now are trying to get the business case going in terms of capturing the market here in terms of local production at 50,000 units, as what the government requires. There is also the requirement for BBBEE. That's very important for us as a company to make sure that we align with the government policies to create this. We're spending millions every year on this here, and now we need to also comply. So I think the feasibility is almost done. We're almost there. The big challenge as well is the quality of the localization. So that might take us some time if we do go ahead and push the button, let's manufacture here, to bring our local suppliers, our Chinese suppliers, and to also look at who is capable locally to manufacture the high quality, the high technology vehicles that we are actually bringing at the moment. So hope that answers your question.
Yes, you have. At some point, I was tempted to wear my business development hat from AITC when you're talking about the skills development shortage and and what you're actually looking for, to say, wow, you've come to the right place, because that's what AITC is here to do for you. And we'll have discussions after this, definitely have discussions. Mr. Liteko, I'm going to be cautious this year.
It was this year, by the way, last time.
Oh, sorry, it was earlier this year. There's quite a lot of talk when it comes to the localization. And Neil here was also talking on the aspect of the shortage of skills in the component manufacturing space. Fully aware that you also a pastor, but the question that I'm going to be asking you has got nothing to do with Psalm 35 in the Bible, but the South African master plan that we're going to be talking about. As a representative of NAMSA, you know that we've got a target, that we have to have localized the components that goes into a vehicle to up to 60% by year 2035. And currently, we're sitting at less than 40. Now, what are the plans in the industry? Because at this point in time, localization is more of a choice to the OEMs. It's not a must. Is it a must?
It's in the master plan. Localization
Well,
is in a master plan.
It's
So
in the master plan,
it's
but
a must.
what are we doing to ensure that we enforce it?
It's a funny one. Yeah, thanks, Dr. Mzinyati. Let me take one step back and then try to answer your call, because to a lot of points that Neil just spoke to and Ma'am Esther earlier, it's important for that perspective to be reflected on. So the way we measure local value addition is that we look at the cost of producing a vehicle, and we subtract from that cost all the imported cost, which is imported value into a vehicle. And whatever is left then is your LVA, which is your local value addition. It means this is not the value that was generated from imported components, it's the value generated from internal ones. And at this point, we know that on average, a South African vehicle has about 39, as an average of last year, 39% local value, which was generated from local, whether local labor or local supply chain. Now, or the OEMs themselves. Now, this is important to reflect on for two reasons. One, value addition in a vehicle happens predominantly in the current setup at OEM level, meaning that OEMs themselves are responsible for what local content we have in a vehicle, and they're responsible for a significant percentage of it. In fact, current estimates put it at around 70%. So 70% of local value in vehicles is still at OEM level. And then Tier 1 are responsible for about 20%, and then Tier 2s, Tier 3s, Tier 4s, well, Tier 3s in particular, and standard material suppliers will be responsible for 10%. Now, the global trends tells us that the opposite tends to be the case if you've got a mature supply chain. So with a mature supply chain, your Tier 3s tend to be the ones delivering at around 60%, your Tier 2s at around 80, Tier 1s, and then you could make your way into the OEMs providing little value. Now, the reason why that's possible, it's got to do with the concept of technology competitiveness. at OEM level, with OEMs currently investing in the region of about 2 billion a year, and that investment flow going at OEM level, our factories have the ability to adjust to technology requirements for production far much more faster than our tier 1 level has investment muscle to do so. So where I would differ with Neil around the competencies of our tier 1 levels to meet what would be a cherry feasible supply chain is on the basis that obviously capital buys you the technology and capital buys you the competence. And so some of these hurdles you would believe that we would be able to overcome. But at OEM level, it's easy for those conversions to happen where an opportunity to localize could exist there, and then you could create technology competencies and abilities to therefore deliver on that localization, and that value is kept at an OEM level. And that is the first thing we need to start to correct. And we correct it by thinking of localization as a product not only of skills, but as a product of skills with technology localization. Now, what we tend to want to do as a solution as a country is that we try to localize tier 1s. So if I've got an OEM, I'd rather get my tier 1 who's sitting in Germany to localize at my food doorstep so that vertical integration happens. And we know how success China has had with vertical integration and getting all their suppliers to exist in the same precinct with the OEM, and it's a learning. But some tier 1 suppliers will not come to South Africa and give you the right investment to do that technology locally when you're only ordering 30,000 units from them because the scale is too low. So that business case then has got a challenge. But what we have not asked ourselves is what is available for us as a competitive advantage. This morning on this stage, you had 3 or 4 research papers being presented by expert academic minds of our country and research minds of our country. And we've never brought them into that industrialization conversation to create that industrial complex between industry and academia and government in South Africa. So they two are growing parallel to each other. But there's a lot of licensed production that we could mobilize as industry if we know where it lands. And currently when we mobilize this localization and licensed production, it lands at our factories as OEMs rather than land with tier 1s or land with our research institution or land with potentially our would-be new suppliers. And this is the failure of us being deliberate as an industry to close that chasm between research and industrial output. And that's where the work will need to happen. So by that I mean, if it were possible for us to identify through our incubation programs would-be suppliers, and we deliberately say we're going to cut 1% into that imported component value that is now 60%. That's about, 1% is about $1 billion in local spending that we could actually have. But now we need to get ways to make it land in a way that the quality is not compromised. And licensed production, for instance, by black suppliers or black industrialists to OEMs on the basis that they are producing locally to a license owned by someone offshore, for instance. It's a conversation that does not exist in our ecosystem for lack of that complex between academia, research, and industry. And so we need to solve quite a lot of things to make it happen. And so having had a discussion with, say, Chinese OEMs that enjoy vertical integration, where an OEM technically owns the entire value chain, the supply chain exists within their own body. Getting them to bring the OEM assembly component to South Africa and license out those suppliers to local suppliers because they can just transplant the entire vertically integrated system into our country. It's going to be an area where we need to put our heads together and we need to be deliberate about how we solve. So my industrial research background tells me that what we define as an industrialist should be an academic researcher in South Africa, not necessarily a small business entrepreneur, and that we need to be converting a lot of our university PhD researchers into industrial producers that are able to thrive in this industry. And that conversation does not exist as a solid conversation on any platform. And that's what we solving for as industry currently? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Coming back to you, Sis Esther, with this new technology that is coming through, you just started as Ford to produce the plug-in hybrid. Will I be right to say it is an opportunity with this new technology to introduce new role players in the value chain of component manufacturing in South Africa? Because the tendency is always that when it comes to component manufacturing, we sort of rotate within the same tier ones, tier twos, based on the experience and the quality that is going to be coming out of there, not wanting to take the risk of going and engaging with black industrialists because of the fears that comes, the risk that comes with the running of a production in case there's a line stoppage. From the Ford side, you have taken the risk, going back to the incubation program, whereby you said AIDC will put you responsible to play that role of a safety net in ensuring that your incubatees do not stop our production line, and that has been a success. Now, moving forward, Ford's plans in expanding that program and ensuring that we attract more black industrialists, and also moving it to the next level now, not necessarily being incubation, but moving towards the accelerator program where we identify black industrialists or SMMEs that can play a role, but with the AIDC still playing the role of providing the safety net. What are the opportunities there?
Thank you, Chair. I think opportunities exist in all areas of the business, not just for Ford, but for all the OEMs that are in South Africa. It is how we look at those opportunities and what value do they bring into the business. You're right by saying that, we obviously, our main core source is the tier one. But how do we collectively, the AIDC, the business, the OEM, critical, the governance around there. What regulations and policies come into play that makes the OEMs, the tier one, to bring abroad the black industrialists to come into play? Because, for investors to come in, we are all driven by the regulations and the policies that exist in any countries. How is the ease of getting those policies into play and following through on what has been put into play? My colleague mentioned BBBE here. It talks about skills development, so it talks about supply and enterprise development. How intentional are we in taking those elements and making them become a reality? Because those are the elements that talks to black industrialists. Coming back to us, that is one key area that we really focus on building the black industrialists, and not just building them for the sake of having them there, but they should be growing and being sustainable. When I got the brief that we were coming here, I saw that the AITF was also going to be on the panel. And that is where it becomes key for the AITF to unlock these opportunities. Because as much as we can talk about our enterprise development budget or skills, it's not enough. Because we need scale. And that is what drives the OEM. We need scale. You could come to me and say, I'm building a component. Because I am in business, I'm going to squeeze you to sell it to me at the least price or at the most competitive price that I have. So we need to ensure that we build scale, but not just scale. We need to ensure that we build what is required by all the OEMs. That is why our business is so unique, is that everyone that is here We are not building the same component or the same commodity, and that is where the challenge comes in. The scale is not enough for the black industrialist that comes in.
Thank you, Sis Esther. I just want to go back to another point to Mr. Liteko. You know, earlier on, it was mentioned that there is a challenge or there is a scare which is called range anxiety when it comes to the increasing number of sales for the electric vehicles or new energy vehicles in the country. From NAMSA, to move that needle in ensuring that there is a take-up into the new energy vehicles. What are you doing? And hence I'm putting this question through to you as a representative body for the OEMs, not specifically asking Neil or Esther what are they doing from Ford or Cherry, but from your side. What is NAMSA doing in ensuring that there is a broader infrastructure when it comes to the charging infrastructure throughout the country?
Thanks. By the way, I should add that both of them have got nice products that I've had a chance to test drive on South African roads. So I've had a Ford plug-in hybrid that I've test driven, and the Jetto J7 plug-in, and the Cherry Tiggo Pro 7 plug-in. So those products are quite good products. So let me acknowledge them. But yeah, Gauteng to P, but I've also driven from Gauteng to Cape Town on our roads. So effectively, Tatem Zinyati, there's 3 fears. We do have range anxiety as an anxiety for owning an electric vehicle, because once you get into an electric vehicle, unlike a petrol car, it tells you how far it can go. And there's a mental adjustment that goes with knowing how far I can go with this car versus driving a petrol engine, and you know you've ran out of petrol and you're on reserve tank. But you can trust that this car is going to give me 80 kilometers without seeing it. And so an electric car is clever enough to tell you you can only go up to 10 kilometers. And then your question becomes, will I make it to the next charging point on the basis that I know I only have 10 kilometers to go? That's range anxiety. Then you could get to the charger and your car refuses to have a handshake with the particular charging machine that you are at, purely because you never know. It could be load shedding. It could be that the charging point does not have power, or the technology in your car cannot necessarily communicate with the technology from the charging point, and so the handshake does not happen. So that's called charger anxiety, and it's also one of those big anxieties. And the third fear that we have with adoption is got to do with the fact of it takes a lot upfront to pay for these vehicles. They charge slightly more than our ICE vehicles, but the total cost of ownership, we tend to believe, favors new electric vehicles because they become cheaper with time. So that's not me answering your question. That's just me saying fears sometimes come from multiple sources. But on the infrastructure point of view, NAMSA is doing 2 projects. One is that we have, together with the AIT, have gone and identified a would-be black supplier who's going to partner with a charging infrastructure supplier to increase the amount of charging points that are available on our roads. That's one. And to make sure that there's more charging points to allow for a lot of these. We know for a fact that the current charging infrastructure on our roads, if we're going to get to a place where 50% of our new vehicle sales is going to be charging vehicles, battery electric or plug-in hybrids, we'll therefore need almost 700 times the amount of charging points that we have currently. So we've gone ahead and we're partnering, and we've made funding available through our ecosystem to make sure that these charging points are increased. That's one aspect of it. Now, the second aspect of it is what's in the charging point or a charging station, and how much of it can be localized. So we then went and raised funding to reverse engineer the charging station to see how much of it can be localized and what that means as an opportunity for a would-be black industrialist to also form part of the production of these things once we move forward. So if you're going to be producing 700 times of what we have currently installed, how much does that represent in opportunities for a would-be industrialist, especially because high voltage wiring is some things that already we have black suppliers we're operating in. Your aluminum boxes that are shielding and protecting these units is something already we have competence in South Africa for. And so should we be even thinking about importing these stations like we are currently? Or should that be a local competence? So NAMSA has completed a project this year to figure out how to make that a local competence so that moving forward we can produce these units locally. And those are two examples of projects where NAMSA is deliberately introducing interventions.
Neil, this will be part of your parting shot. As you have mentioned that Cherry is actually leading in terms of export into China. From the trends that you have noticed from your organization, looking into the South African market, how soon do you think the curve is going to change where there is a more buy-in into the new energy vehicles as compared to the ICE vehicles? Because the graph has been flat for quite some time, and some of the reasons were the infrastructure anxiety, where people, what Mr. Liteko have just explained, that people have got concerns of changing to the new technology. Now, with the introduction of these new vehicles that are coming more from the east, how soon do you think this graph is going to change, where there is more increase onto the new energy vehicles and more, not necessarily saying surpassing the ICE vehicles? How quickly do you think that change will be coming?
Tomorrow. Okay, so before I get into this, I actually want to highlight something from questions from several bit earlier, was on the supply chain or the vertical integration for the Eastern brands. I'm not talking only China, I'm talking India as well, where, and the universities and what important role they play. I love our universities in Africa, but we are still very Western influenced. And we are very academic based. I come from an R&D background. And I've worked in Europe and in Asia. And there's a big difference. When I joined Cherry, my director, the person my same level we were reporting to, was 27 years old. I was 40 when I joined. And he only spent 3 years at university as an electrical engineer. And then he worked on the Cherry line for 6 months. And now he's a country director for Thailand. So what I'm saying is that we need to look at how we change our thinking towards academia and academia becoming a business and becoming the provider, because we have something also called Cherry technology, where our suppliers, we own our suppliers. And that's why I'm saying my business case to localize is very different and very difficult to yours, because we need to bring everybody at one time. So I think that's what we need to understand. And the speed, we have people working 24/7. I'm not saying it's slavery at some point, but people want to work. They want to have that passion to work at Cherry. They want to, because we are, other Chinese OEMs aren't as complex as us, but to have that drive and passion for the automotive industry from younger people, which we need here in South Africa, not just to become small business owners. We need something bigger. We need something greater. The trend of the automotive industry coming to play was highly driven by incentives. Maybe in the UK, we saw the incentives when it went up, the NEV went up, but it's been flat for one specific reason. It's still high. The uptake of vehicles are still high. But so there is a volumetric, there may be a percentage every month going at a pretty flat rate, but there's still 100,000, 200,000 cars, new energy vehicles being bought. Because once you start driving the cars, please, my 2 cars are out there, have a look at the cars. Understand that the whole driving experience changes when the driving dynamics changes completely. when you drive a new energy vehicle. I'm talking plug-in hybrid, battery electric vehicle, and a hybrid vehicle. And the idea behind this for us, where people are starting to become more and more educated. Education is very critical for us, experience and education. And we're seeing this in China because there's a slowdown in China because some provinces actually you can only sell electric vehicle on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Then you have to sell. So this is what's other drivers in the thing. Some ban the electric vehicles because there is for sale because there's too many electric vehicles. So that also slows down. So the demand is there. Europe is kind of very small in terms of the number of cars it's sold. So it's already in that state of 10 years where electric vehicles are being bought. And they're closing their doors now to ICE. And this becomes a challenge. South Africa needs to look at new global partners. We need to look away from the Western partners, that's Europe and Americas, and look at the East and how we can sell to the East. This is the message I'm bringing across to everybody. That's my business case. We have the skills, we have this here, we just need to have the right partnerships going forward.
Thank you, Neil. Just a follow-up, Neil, on your side. Any plans for you going to Africa and using South Africa as a platform?
So in our feasibility, the first two key points, can't tell you the first one, I might tell the second one. The second one is to be a established South Africa, because we are a mature automotive production country, to create a gateway, I hate using the word gateway into Africa, but to be the vessel that we can start producing vehicles that we can export into Africa. I know AITF, African Free Trade Agreements coming through. There are vessels that we can actually look at, but also we at very big risk because the rest of Africa is a dumping ground for the rest of the world. And we need to stand up to the rest of the world, keep your cars. Right, don't dump it in, you have to recycle your cars, recycle your things, because it is a 360 value chain on NEV. When it comes to recycling, all of stuff. So all Kenya is taking cars from Japan, where are the batteries going? Is managed properly? It's not. We are being abused again in that specific sense. So we want to go into Africa, we have a plan to go into Africa, but we have other challenges. Okay, so the West needs to stop allowing that facility to come in then we can increase the African automotive new car sales. I think that will, on the LCV side, that's going to be a help amazing. If we can actually stop the grey imports to increase the market. So in Africa. And I think this is where the challenge is coming. We want to go into Africa, but for the last 17 years I've been involved, nothing has changed in Africa.
Thank you very much. Sister Esther?
Yes, Chair.
Last words.
Last word. I think what is key when we're looking at NEV and transitioning into NEV, it's key that we sustain what we have, currently what we have, albeit it be ICE, but it's key that we sustain that, because once we start looking at the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, we heard last week that the autos has now been approved under African Continental Free Trade Agreement. That is a huge opportunity for South Africa to be going in there, but we need to be in a state of readiness. Number one, we need to make sure that our black industrialists are ready to go in there. They've got the scale that they require, they've got the skills that they require to go in there. We need to create the demand that the people want to trade with South Africa. We need to have the right commodities in South Africa that we are prepared to give to Africa, not even looking outside, but to give to Africa. But we also need to ensure that we remain competitive, whether it being with our policies that we have and whether it being in the way that we do things. But we need to make sure that we up our game. We also need to be super careful because there are other African countries that are really coming up behind us, and they're a real force that we need to reckon with. If we take, for example, what Morocco is currently doing, we need to be super worried as to what we are doing currently, and we need to ensure that we take the low-hanging fruits. One of them being are our logistics in place, which is what is the vehicle that drives us? Is our policy in place, which is what drives us? Do we have the right skills in place? Are we equipping our people the way that they should be equipped in order for them to be ready when the time comes? I'm cognizant of your time.
Thank you.
So according to the clock, I've got 30 seconds.
No, they have actually extended yours with 4 minutes.
Okay.
So from NAMSA, what would you say as your parting words?
So I would say that, look, two things for me are important. Whenever I speak to Gauteng champions for industrial growth, I think Gauteng needs to treat itself as a cluster, and you need to look into cluster development as a mechanism. KZN and Gauteng, both of them are auto clusters that are set by default, not by investment. And so if you invest as a cluster into how you develop the region to be catalytic for the growth of the auto industry, you'll see that your interventions would make sense. We do most of our steel fabrication still in the east. We manufacture the cars almost in the west, northwest, and in Pretoria, and then we put them 5 by 5 on the road to go to Durban. 5 by 5, Master. It's horrible what Ford is doing to us when we go to holidays to Durban, because we have to overtake all these 5 cars going to the shoreline. So we need to figure out how to put more cars. But my point here being, cluster development means that as a cluster, you have to figure out what your synergies are, what your required infrastructure is, and then you need to support that cluster to be a deliberate cluster so that things are not happening haphazard, and that will lead to the type of economic growth that we need, even in the interim, before we even think around what mobility looks like. Neil was talking about level 1 autonomous vehicles, and these are cars that drive themselves, and where would they do that in Gauteng? It's a question that we need to be solving for. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's give the panelists a round of applause, and thank you very much.
From boardrooms to the exhibition floor, the NEV Summit 2025 demonstrated the collective will to drive South Africa's automotive evolution. The world accelerates towards a low-carbon future, with government, industry, and academia moving up. South Africa is poised to lead Africa's shift to new energy vehicles.